Hands where we can see them. The command cracked through the coastal air like a rifle shot. Salt wind tugged at the edges of tarps and tangled nets. Morning light slanted across the deck of the Liberty Bell, catching the silver in Elias Harper's beard. He raised his hands slowly, deliberately, fingers gnarled from decades of rope and war. No fear in the motion. Just quiet resolve. 5 federal agents spread out like a practice drill team, boots thudding over warped planks. They moved fast, their rifles held just low enough to avoid full panic, but high enough to mean business. One clipped a nylon strap to the bow cleat, anchoring the cutter. Another peeled back a tarp, revealing coiled netting and the scent of diesel and fish. The boat rocked gently beneath them, indifferent. Elias stood near the helm, his jacket zipped to the throat, faded insignia just barely visible on one shoulder. "Is there a problem, officers?" His voice was steady, wrapped in gravel and years. It carried easily over the hum of the bay. They didn't answer. One agent dropped to a knee and opened a storage locker. Another rifled through a crate of tackle, scattering hand-tied lures across the deck like dead butterflies. Charts were pulled from beneath a waterproof sleeve. A journal, its spine cracked and pages dense with symbols, was held up, inspected, and discarded. A third agent, young and tense, lifted a laminated ID from the wheel's console. He paused. "Commander Harper," he read aloud, blinking. The name rippled through the squad like a change in wind direction. But Elias didn't move. Didn't blink. He watched them work, watched them get it all wrong, as if this were the first time a man like him had been misunderstood. And it wouldn't be the last. Each morning, Elias Harper walked the same path to Pier 6, the boards creaking underfoot like old bones. The dock overlooked Wilmington's inland waters, quiet in the early light, touched by mist. His boat, Liberty Bell, waited in slip 24, tethered by rope he'd knotted himself, once strong enough to hoist wounded men into helicopters. He was 73 when Elias died. He hadn't missed a day since. Now 81, he moved slower, favoring his left leg where shrapnel had lodged decades ago. But the ritual never changed. Unlock the cabin, run checks on the lines, wipe the salt from the windshield. Make coffee in the metal percolator that hissed like a whisper from the past. Liberty Bell had no luxuries. No sonar, no radar. Just Elias and the tide. Inside the wheelhouse was a single framed photo. Elias, smiling, half in shadow, a red cross patch on her shoulder. Beneath it, a small brass plaque, "To those who wait, and the ones who come back." He polished it each week with a worn cloth, as if memory needed upkeep. They'd met in Da Nang in '69. She stitched soldiers back together with the same calm she used to read him poetry by lantern light. He fell in love quietly, completely. Married her before his final tour. After discharge, they bought the boat and the dock slip and lived on the edge of town where the noise faded. He became a fixture, neither hidden nor entirely seen. He never spoke much about his work. Navy cryptography, patterns, radio frequencies, intercepted plans. He'd spent months hunched over shortwave receivers decoding coordinates, occasionally saving lives without ever touching a battlefield. But his body bore proof of danger. The scar on his abdomen from a surprise mortar. His rigid left hand, locked half shut from a fall during evacuation. Locals called him the last codebreaker. Part reverence, part myth. Elias didn't mind. After Elisa's funeral, he gave up their landline. The internet. Television. Technology meant nothing without her laughter beside it. He fished for food, not sport. Sold what he didn't eat to the market near Water Street. The income was just enough. His pension came in the mail, and the VA clinic still recognized his face, even if the younger staff didn't know his name. His journals were his only indulgence. Black notebooks filled with hand-drawn ciphers, tide notations, and fishing patterns. Some were decipherable. Most weren't. A lifetime of habit. Once you mapped chaos for a living, you couldn't stop. He treated the sea the way he once treated enemy transmissions, respectfully, analytically. Sometimes, when the mornings were still and the fog didn't lift, he'd sit on the bow and hum the hymns Elias used to love. Come thou fount, be still my soul. He said little, but music was memory's hand on his shoulder. He kept to himself. But people noticed. The high school kid working summers at the marina always nodded respectfully. Morning, Mr. Harper. Never, Elias. Never, Cap, just Harper, like a title. The bait shop left him live shrimp in a cooler on the honor system. Even the teenagers who loitered near the dock in summer kept their distance. Something about him commanded stillness. That morning, like any other, Elias cast off just before sunrise. He steered past the channel markers, engine low, fingers steady on the wheel. South of the inlet, near a quiet shelf where red drum gathered at dawn, he dropped anchor. Coffee steamed beside him. Journal opened to a page marked with circles, numbers, dates. Wind ruffled the edges. He licked his finger and smoothed them flat. He was mid-cast when he heard it, the hum of a different engine, louder, sharper. Then the long, mechanical voice of a bullhorn. Vessel Liberty Bell. Heave to. Prepare for boarding. He turned. A Homeland Security cutter approached fast. Elias sighed. Reeled in. He'd been boarded before, once by wildlife when a tag wasn't visible, once by Coast Guard in a mistaken identity case. Never like this. 3 agents boarded fast. The youngest kept his hand close to his sidearm. Another agent, mid-40s, scanned the boat with practiced precision. The lead officer, stocky, serious, stepped forward with a folder in hand. We received a tip, he said flatly. Possible weapons storage. Coordinates match. Elias raised one eyebrow. You think I'm running guns on a fishing boat? Routine inspection, the agent said, already moving. They opened every hatch. Ripped open canvas storage. Charts tossed aside. His coded journals, scattered. Then they opened the bench box. Inside was a photo. Elise, again. Her wedding dress this time. A pressed carnation tucked into the frame's corner. One agent lifted it out. Careful, Elias said, quiet but sharp. They paused. But didn't apologize. And just like that, something old stirred in him. He'd once endured mortar fire while preserving a frequency that saved men's lives. Now his wife's photo sat exposed on a foreign man's glove. And something unspoken, had changed. The morning sun burned off the last of the haze as Elias Harper stood quietly at the stern of his boat, boots planted, jaw set. The Homeland Security agents continued their search, now more forceful, less restrained. It had moved beyond a routine inspection. You sure this is the right boat? One of them muttered. The younger agent, Alvarez, leaned over the bench compartment again. Everything matches. Coordinates. Hull specs. Anonymous intel flagged this one. Agent Ramirez, older, more cautious, remained silent. He flipped through the pages of a printed report in his folder, satellite images, GPS pings, a map of the coastal shelf marked with red X's. He looked up, squinting toward the horizon. No transmission signature. No activity outside the slip except daily outings. And no crew. He's alone, Alvarez said. But this hull could carry half a ton of contraband easy. Elias didn't interrupt. He watched one of the agents uncap a sealed compartment he had built himself years ago to store tools and a portable propane stove. The agent opened it, then frowned. Inside were 4 thermoses, 2 tins of coffee, and a rusted compass with Elisa's name engraved on the bottom. Looks like gear from the 70s, he muttered. Who the hell uses this stuff? Ramirez turned to Elias. Sir, we need to know if there are any weapons aboard. Elias replied evenly, there's a fillet knife under the cutting board. A flare gun in the bow locker. And a gaff hook. Nothing else. You sure? Elias looked him square in the eye. This boat hasn't carried a weapon since it came home from my first tour. No one moved for a moment. Then the young agent moved aft and opened a storage crate. Inside were dozens of waterproof bags, each carefully labeled with dates and hand-drawn symbols. What the hell is this? He asked. Fishing records, Elias answered. Alvarez shook one open. It revealed pages written in ciphered shorthand, patterns of letters, boxes, underlines. He's coding these, he said. This guy's encrypting something. They're fish logs, Elias said, voice low. Depth, temperature, movement patterns. The younger agent snapped the folder closed, irritated. Why the codes? I think in patterns, Elias said. Used to work in signals intelligence. Some habits don't break. The agents didn't seem to hear him. They moved through the cabin now, tearing through drawers, toppling containers. One bumped the helm console hard enough to send the framed photo of Elise clattering to the deck. Elias stepped forward, faster than he meant to. Leave it, he said, voice sharpened. Ramirez looked over, pausing as Elias bent to pick up the frame. He dusted it off with his sleeve, then returned it to its spot beside the compass. She served too, he said simply. Red Cross. Saigon. Alvarez wasn't moved. You sure about that ID? He asked his partner. Ran it through the system. Ramirez gestured toward the terminal on the cutter. Came back clear. Name, discharge, service commendations. You believe it? Ramirez didn't answer. I don't care what he did back then, Alvarez muttered. This boat fits the profile. It's been modified. These compartments, the logs, the isolation. You don't think that's odd? Elias turned, slow and deliberate. I've fished this coast since '74. I built every change with my own hands. For weather, not for secrets. You're looking in the wrong place. You live alone. No phone. No digital footprint. I lost the one thing I needed to talk to, Elias replied. Ramirez hesitated. The rhythm of the investigation had shifted. He could feel it. The man before them wasn't resisting, wasn't pleading. He was, enduring. And that unnerved them more than anything. Alvarez walked toward the journal and picked it up again, thumbing the coded lines. Where did you learn this? He asked. NSA training, 1966. Transferred to cryptographic ops. Signals. I helped track troop movement by radio scatter. We weren't given medals, we were told to forget. So why keep all this? Elias looked down at the pages. Because forgetting isn't the same as healing. That silenced them briefly. Then the cutter's radio crackled. Ramirez stepped out and returned a minute later, face changed. He walked to Elias and asked him to confirm his full name again. Elias James Harper, Elias said. Ramirez nodded slowly. Commander Elias Harper. Retired Navy Intelligence. Bronze Star with V device. 2 Presidential Unit citations. CIA commendations classified. Is that all accurate? Yes. Alvarez's face drained. What? Ramirez turned to him. We were wrong. The cutter's operator had patched into Central Records. The ID was valid. Not just valid, legendary. HQ says stand down immediately. Alvarez looked as if he'd been punched. He's that Harper. The Harper, Ramirez said quietly. Elias looked down at the scattered logs. The open compartments. Elisa's photo, still slightly askew. This happens often? He asked. No, sir, Ramirez replied. Anonymous tips are usually domestic. Someone sent you here knowing what you'd find? We don't know. Elias nodded once. You've seen what you came to see. Ramirez signaled the other agents. They began reassembling what they'd disturbed. Slowly. With hands now unsure. But damage, once done, didn't disappear. Elias closed the lid of the storage crate. Picked up the chart that had been crumpled. Smoothed it flat with careful hands. He didn't ask for an apology. Didn't need one. They hadn't spoken in over a minute. Elias sat on the edge of his bench, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the horizon. The agents moved quieter now, their earlier certainty drained away. None of them touched the journals again. Ramirez stood with his arms crossed, watching Elias like a man trying to decipher something older than protocol. Why didn't you say who you were right away? He asked. Elias shrugged. Didn't see the point. You would have avoided all this. Maybe. But it tells me more to let people show their hand first. He didn't say it with malice. Just with the flat understanding of someone who'd long since traded emotion for clarity. His words hung there, neither invitation nor rebuke. The agents continued working in pairs, quietly repacking items they'd displaced. The youngest, Alvarez, kept glancing toward Elias like he didn't know what to say. Like something inside him had cracked but hadn't yet fallen apart. I read about you once, Alvarez finally said, voice low. Article about some operation near Hugh. Said a cryptographer predicted an ambush. Saved 40 Marines. I didn't predict it, Elias corrected. I read signals that were there all along. Just no one had looked close enough. Still, Alvarez muttered, almost to himself. 40 lives. It was 40 then. Next time it was 27. Then 6. He paused. And then just 1. Alvarez didn't ask for details. He didn't have to. The stillness in Elias's tone spoke of years weighed down by knowledge, not bullets. Not all wounds bleed. Ramirez approached, holding out the photo of Elise. I think this is yours, he said carefully. Elias took it, wiped a fleck of dust from the corner with his thumb. Thank you. He stood slowly and returned it to the wheelhouse, setting it precisely where it had been. Behind him, one of the other agents checked the cutter's console again. A female voice buzzed over the channel, confirmation from HQ, repeat, subject is former Commander Elias J. Harper. Multiple honors. Last known government clearance, Omega Sierra. Operation name redacted. No further action recommended. Ramirez listened. Then turned toward Elias again. I apologize for the intrusion. Elias didn't nod. Didn't frown. Just watched the sea. I didn't build this boat to carry secrets, he said finally. But it carries memory. That's heavier. They understood then, they weren't just in the wrong place. They were in the presence of someone who lived between lines of history, someone the system had once used, filed away, and forgotten. Until now. Alvarez tried again. Do you think the tip was intentional? A setup? Elias didn't look at him. People don't like things they can't label. An old man who lives alone, off-grid, near a coastline. They want a clean story. And when they can't write one, they write a warning. Ramirez said nothing. Elias turned back toward them. You've all got protocol to follow. I respect that. But maybe think twice about what a name doesn't tell you. The agent started back toward the cutter, silence hanging between them. One of them, taller and built like a linebacker, hesitated before stepping off the boat. Sir, he said stiffly, we didn't mean disrespect. Elias considered that. Then carry it forward. Not just back here. Elsewhere. The man nodded once, eyes steady, then turned away. The cutter pulled from the Liberty Bell's side, the gap between hulls widening slowly. Elias watched them go, arms crossed, jaw clenched slightly tighter than usual. Not in anger. Just in tired defense. He returned to his seat, picked up one of the scattered journals, and flipped it open. The page was smudged from someone's thumb, ink blurred just enough to make a pattern unreadable. He sighed and closed it, setting it gently beside the others. The wind had shifted by then. Tides, too. He lit the small propane stove and brewed another cup of coffee. Sat with it at the stern, watching the empty horizon where the cutter had disappeared. The sea, as always, remained unchanged. But something inside him, quiet, unseen, had turned. At the dock later that evening, word had already spread. A boy from the nearby shop offered to help him tie off the line. A marina employee nodded a little longer than usual. Even the gulls, loud and insistent, kept their distance as Elias stepped onto the pier. No questions were asked. No stories shared. But silence, sometimes, tells the truth better than noise. The next morning, Elias returned to the dock before the sun rose, same as always. But something was different. The gulls called louder. The water slapped harder at the pier pilings. Or maybe it was just that the silence he kept had been stirred. He untied Liberty Bell with methodical precision, casting off lines as the mist curled low across the inlet. By the time he reached the outer marker, the sun had begun bleeding faint light over the water. He throttled down, letting the boat drift into the usual spot by the rock shelf. He didn't fish. Not that day. He sat behind the helm, his hands resting on the wheel like an anchor point. On the dash sat Elisa's photo and, beside it, the battered brass compass. The morning air still held a chill. At precisely 7:10 a.m., a faint hum stirred behind him. He turned. A skiff approached, small, civilian. Not law enforcement this time. One man aboard. Elias said nothing, just watched. The man docked with practiced ease and climbed aboard, carrying nothing but a small thermos and a fishing rod. It was Ramirez. Civilian clothes, windbreaker, jeans, sneakers dusted with sand. No weapon. No radio. Just him. Sir, he said. Elias gestured toward the starboard bench. You're early. I didn't want to miss you. Elias nodded, looked back to see. Ramirez sat quietly for a while. Let the silence do what words couldn't. The boat rocked in long, steady intervals. Finally, he said, I read your file last night. The redacted version. Still enough to know we were out of our depth. Elias didn't reply. I didn't know men like you were still alive, Ramirez continued. Or that we'd ever treat them like suspects. Elias sipped his coffee. We're all suspects eventually. It just depends who's asking. Ramirez didn't try to argue. Instead, he unscrewed the thermos lid and poured 2 paper cups, offering one. Elias took it without ceremony. My father served, Ramirez said. 442nd Infantry. Pacific Theater. Japanese American. Fought harder than most men who called him slurs. Elias glanced at him. He came back quiet. Built furniture. Drank coffee like it was medicine. He died 10 years ago. But yesterday, standing on your deck, I felt like I was talking to him again. A gust passed over the bow, sharp with salt. Elias looked out across the channel. You stayed calm, Ramirez said. Even when we tore through your life. Why? Elias took a long moment before answering. Because I learned early that fury's a currency. And once you spend it, you've got nothing left to trade. Ramirez nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that. They sat in silence again. In the distance, a school of baitfish broke the surface, scattering silver arcs into the morning light. Ramirez opened the rod case. "I haven't fished in years," he said. "Figured I'd try again." Elias reached below the bench and pulled out a small tin. Inside were hand-tied flies, each one delicate, intricate, wrapped in colored thread. He chose one, a red-bodied fly with gray wings, and handed it over. "She tied this," he said softly. "Elise said red was lucky." Ramirez accepted it like a fragile heirloom. "Thank you." The cast was clumsy. The line slapped the water unevenly. Elias didn't correct him. Some lessons weren't verbal. By mid-morning, the sun sat higher, warming the air. They hadn't caught anything. But Ramirez didn't seem to mind. He reeled in, adjusted his grip, cast again. "You ever think about moving inland?" he asked. Elias gave a half-shake of the head. "The land forgets. The water remembers." Ramirez smiled. "My father would have said the same." As they sat, a small patrol boat passed in the distance, slowing as it neared. The crew gave a casual wave. Elias returned it with 2 fingers raised from the wheel. Recognition passed without formality. "They briefed everyone," Ramirez said quietly. "Your name's off the watch lists. Should have never been there." "I'm not worried about lists," Elias replied. "I'm worried about what they mean when they become easy." Ramirez turned his cup in his hands. "Some of us still know the difference. We just forget to speak it." "Then start," Elias said. No anger in his voice. Just the flat truth. They fished until noon. Never caught a thing. But when Ramirez packed up, he looked lighter. The kind of light that comes not from joy, but from clarity. Before he left, he turned back at the bow. "Mind if I come back sometime?" Elias nodded once. "Bring better boots." Ramirez smiled. "Yes, sir." As the skiff peeled away toward shore, Elias watched until the vessel blurred into heat shimmer. Then he turned back to the journal spread on his lap. He took out a pencil, flipped to the margin, and in clean block letters wrote, "Met one who remembered." Then he closed the book. At sunrise, the dock was already breathing. The tide moved slow but steady, brushing the pylons like a ritual. Gull cries broke the stillness in sharp, scattered bursts. Elias Harper was already aboard Liberty Bell, sleeves rolled, canvas cover folded neatly at his feet. He sat at the stern, sharpening a knife along a whetstone in rhythmic strokes. Footsteps echoed on the dock behind him. Elias didn't turn. He didn't need to. The boots were newer this time, but the stride was careful. A little hesitant. The kind of walk that respects silence. Agent Ramirez, now off duty, again in civilian clothes, approached holding a paper bag and a thermos. His posture less rigid today. His expression open. "Brought breakfast," he said. "Hope you still take your coffee black." Elias glanced over. "If it's not black, it's not coffee." Ramirez smiled and stepped aboard without waiting for permission. Elias handed him a rod already prepped, the line looped through eyelets, a lure affixed. The same red thread fly Elise had tied. Ramirez looked at it carefully. "You sure?" "She tied them for the boat, not for a shelf." The boat drifted out with a gentle hum from the trolling motor, moving beyond the wake zone, into deeper water. The sun pulled slowly upward through mist, lighting the waves in gold and pewter streaks. They fished for a while without speaking. Ramirez cast quietly, then again, letting the line slip with more ease than the week before. No catch yet, but his hands showed signs of learning. Patient. Intentional. Elias watched him, noting the adjustments. The posture. The control. Better, Elias said. Practice, Ramirez replied. And luck. Elias nodded toward the lure. Luck's in the fly. Rest is on you. They laughed, just once. Not loudly, but real. Minutes passed. Then Elias pulled a weathered tin box from beneath the bench. He opened it and slid out a folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. It was a map, hand-drawn, detailed. Not of fishing waters, but of a coastline marked in radio frequencies, signal intercepts, old war patterns. He laid it on the bench between them. Ramirez leaned over. What is this? History, Elias said. Encrypted and buried too long. Not classified anymore, just forgotten. Ramirez traced one of the inked lines with his finger. Why show me? Elias watched the horizon. Because someday someone has to remember how fragile this all is. How quick people forget the ones who kept signals clean. Quiet men. Paper men. Men who knew the value of noise, and of silence. Ramirez folded the map carefully. You think I'm one of them? Elias looked at him for a long beat. Not yet. But you're listening. Ramirez slipped the map into his bag without a word. Not out of ownership, but stewardship. They cast again. The rod in Ramirez's hand twitched. Once. Then again. A sudden pull. He reeled, gently at first, then with urgency. The line danced on the surface, and moments later a striped base broke water, twisting in a shimmer. Ramirez's grip tightened as he drew it closer. Elias stepped beside him, net in hand, moving with fluid calm. Together, they brought it aboard. Not large. But enough. Ramirez grinned. First catch since I was 12. Elias nodded. Release it. The younger man blinked. You sure? She tied that fly for luck. Not for trophies. Ramirez cradled the fish, lowered it back over the side. It vanished in a flash beneath the hull. They sat back down. Across the water, the faint thump of another boat echoed off the channel walls. Elias glanced that way. A small skiff passed at a distance, local boys, maybe. They waved. Elias raised 2 fingers again. The wave returned. They know you? Ramirez asked. Some do. And the ones who don't? They will. Or they won't. Doesn't change what happened. Later, when the sun was high and the tide slackened, they reeled in lines and turned toward the dock. The marina shimmered in heat. The same pelican sat atop the piling, indifferent as ever. As they tied up, Ramirez turned to him. What happens when you're not here anymore? Elias didn't answer right away. He packed the rods. Secured the hatch. Then he straightened, shoulders slow but square. I leave behind what matters, he said. The rest washes out to sea. Ramirez nodded, watching him. Then opened the paper bag. Inside were 2 biscuits wrapped in foil. 1 sausage. 1's egg and cheese. Guess which is yours. Elias took one, unwrapped it with careful fingers, and bit. Sausage, he said. Ramirez laughed. Lucky guess? Patterns. As they sat on the bench, eating in silence, an older couple passed by on the dock above. They paused for a moment. The man gave a slight nod. The woman touched the brim of her sun hat. Neither said anything. But Elias nodded back. Later that afternoon, when Ramirez was gone and the sky turned a deeper blue, Elias returned to his journal. He opened to a blank page and wrote in clean, steady strokes. Passed it on. Then he closed it. He stood at the bow for a long while, watching the tide ease toward evening, the light softening, the marina quieting. And though no one could see it from shore, he smiled. Not for recognition, but for remembrance. Legacy remembered.